All right, welcome back to the Now Morning Show. And I don't know if you guys remember, but back in October, the national budget for fiscal 2021 was presented in Parliament. And it proposed a range of incentives expected to ease the burden on members of all sectors of society. Here to discuss that a little bit, because some of those things are taking effect from this month, I want to welcome Rukaya Scott, who's the president of the Economic Society of UWI, and also Dana Sukdio, who's the vice president of the same Economic Society of UWI, and she's joining us via Zoom. So good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. First, Rukaya, as you're here, let's start off with you. What are some of the things that stood out for you with this new fiscal 2021?
Well, we had the budget and, we had our discussions surrounding the budget and stuff like that. So in terms of what takes effect, I mean, the article is out there and there are a list of things that came out. But I think one thing that I'm super pleased to see is that 12.5% VAT that has been placed on luxury food items. Now, I think we might feel some type of way. We love our grapes and our apples and our imported foods and thing. The quality might be higher. But the reality of the situation is that we need some sort of incentive to push the agricultural sector locally. And COVID-19 taught us that we really can't depend on food imports, and our food import bill is extremely high. So I think this is one very good way to boost local agriculture. So that is one thing I was very, very pleased to see.
Nice. Dana, can you tell me the stamp duty threshold for residential properties for first-time homeowners? They're going to be increased from 1.5 million to 2 million. What does that mean? Like, how do you break that down to the average person? What does that actually mean?
In the most simplest of terms, I basically think that it means that it's a good thing for first-time homeowners, like as young people are now going into the job market looking to get off on our own feet. This is something I think we can definitely look forward to. Yeah. Because it means that if we go to perhaps take out a mortgage on our new home, that it goes up from taking out a mortgage of 1.5 million to 2 million. And I think that's something that could be a bit of an incentive for first-time homeowners.
All right, fantastic. Rukaya, I saw as well that there were lots of tax exemptions for, starting new tech companies and digitization and things like that. How do you think that's going to fare with everything else that's happening currently?
Well, I don't think we're going to see the effects of it immediately because right now I'm doing youth parliament and we're actually debating on this digital divide that exists in Trinidad and Tobago. Yeah. And, a lot of times in our research would come up these tech startups and these tech companies, but then we'd be like, but what are the tech companies available in Trinidad and Tobago right now? So I think these tax allowances are great incentives to start, so let's start the ball rolling when it comes to technology and companies. And it was just not for tech startups, but it was also for businesses that have technology solutions and digitization, and also for those who create employment in the technology industry. So I think we see some diversity there in terms of technology, but it's not something that we're going to see the immediate effects of.
I was about to ask, do you think we have a vast technology industry as yet?
I don't think we have it currently, but I definitely think this is a great way to start it, and we can see that probably in the next 5 years how it will translate, because we have to remember we're still in COVID-19. We always talk about post-COVID, but we're still in COVID right now.
Yeah, very much in COVID.
So we have to kind of gauge the scene and see how it goes.
All right. Dana, I am particularly interested in the creative industries, and I see that they have a tax allowance for corporate sponsorship of nationals in the local fashion industry, audio, visual, or video productions field, and under specific conditions. But they're going to increase the tax allowance from 6 million to 12 million. Do you think that will actually have an effect on the local creative industry? Dana, can you hear me? Oh, it seems like we lost Dana. Do you want to take a shot at that, Rukaya?
Well, the creative industry has been one of those industries that's taken a serious hit.
The hardest of hards.
This COVID-19, and I mean, we're not even going to get into what we're going to do without Carnival, but...
Because we might cry. But
definitely.
But do you think the tax allowance would make a difference?
It should. You see, it's unfortunate that I think money incentives is what drives people and drives business and that sort of thing, but it is the reality. And tax allowances can be a great help to these businesses and these creators in this industry. So I definitely think, increasing it from 6 to 12 million will help, but it's all about what it is you do with that. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I think because the creative sector has taken such a hit, I think they are waiting and they're ready.
The creative sector might be ready and they might be waiting, but how do we get the corporate sector to see that? Because these tax allowances are fantastic and they sound good on paper, but I mean, if you ever try to go through the process to get the tax allowance, it's a whole different story altogether.
So it speaks to the bureaucracy behind it, the amount of red tape behind all of these things, and which is why I'm always a big advocate for policy changes is great and it's okay, but it has to be actioned, and it has to be in such a way that people can actually access these things. Because I mean, you talk to your parents when they have to get a tax return form, if they have to fill that out, is headache.
It is hell and damnation.
So we have to find ways around the bureaucracy in order for these things to really work. So I will commend the initiatives, but we really need to as we say, strengthen the thing for it to actually work.
Now, you mentioned before that some of the things you don't expect to see the effects of it happening anytime in the near future. Is there anything that you can see having an immediate positive reaction?
Well, definitely in terms of the VAT to the luxury food items. We also have the quota was reduced for the importation of used cars. Now, I know many persons in the car industry would be upset about this, but the reality of the situation is that we have a lot of cars on the road in Trinidad and Tobago.
We can tell by the traffic.
Yes, there's a lot of cars, there are not enough roads. I mean, the solution really isn't to build more roads, right? We kind of have to do something. Now, I'm all for the reduction of importation of used cars, but we have to action that with an efficient and attractive, and I use the word attractive, public transportation system, so that persons would want to take public transport. And it has to be safe as well. We know what's going on in the country in terms of crime and that sort of thing. So if it's not safe, if it's not attractive, and if it's not effective, people aren't going to take the public transportation. So once we get that running, I can see how it can cancel off each other with, you know, the reduction in imports and with the public transportation.
All right, I think Dana is back on the line. Dana, are you there with us?
Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry. I'm having a bit of internet problems this morning.
Yeah, that's all right. It happens. But since you're here, I understand that from January to September this year, 2021, YTEP will administer a program through which young people can have access to over 4,000 courses on Coursera. Do you think that that serves the young people who need the courses?
Yes, you know, I always say that tech VOC programs and these sort of programs are the programs that we actually need to pay attention to. And, you know, investing in education, especially now in a COVID-19 economy, is always critical for economic growth and development. But in particular, I think that these programs is going to be very beneficial to young people and people who are retrenched and things like this, because what we often see happening is that the government will always invest in like universities and in gates and these kind of things. And the target audience for education here is really those in the tech VOC programs and the skills programs. So I think that is a great initiative. It could be beneficial for entrepreneurship, and it can encourage that sustainable avenue to earn foreign exchange.
Okay, fantastic. I'm also seeing, you see, these things, so many interesting things happening with regard to what they have put forward. One of the things is that the subsidy on all liquid fuels is going to be removed, and this allows now for gas station owners to set their own prices. How do you feel about that?
No, you see, when it comes to economics, we have persons who have very different beliefs in terms of what type of economic system you should run, whether it should be free market, whether it should be a controlled market, and that sort of thing. So this is an instance where you're basically going to be encouraging free competition amongst that industry. And what is going to happen is that prices are going to be driven by the forces of demand and supply and the competition of these fuel providers. And what it's going to do is going to create healthy competition for them. Because that's how it works. If 10 of us are selling the same thing, one person isn't going to have a price that's drastically higher, because then obviously there are 9 others to buy from, right? So it's going to create, you know, healthy competition in that way.
But is it healthy competition when there are only 2 people?
Exactly. So that is where we end up in a problem, because it can lead to higher productivity amongst if you have a large number. But what we are entering risky waters when it's just 1 or 2 providers, because then we start talking about monopolies.
Exactly.
And that's when we start talking about price and exploitation and that sort of thing. So in theory, it works, competitive prices, high productivity, but we need to see in reality how that translates with the number of firms that we have.
Interesting. We look forward to see how it will go. Dana, as you're on the line with us still, hopefully, yes, you're there with us, Dana?
Yep.
Nice, fantastic. So I see there are lots of penalties and consequences for, you know, things like pre-deal larceny and quarrying, illegal quarrying and things like that. Do you think those things will actually have a direct impact on the economy?
I think when you talk about penalties and things like this, what you're really seeing is ways of the government trying to get that extra tax revenue. So I see, for example, that they have increased taxes on the sale of tobacco and things like this, increased by 200%. These things are habitual goods, as people would say. And sometimes what you would find is that even though they're increasing the penalties for it, people still engage and they still do it. And this is really just a way for the government to, get that extra tax revenue in to really help the tax revenue that they very much need at this point in time.
Do you think that taxing the public, taxing the public to gain revenue, is that the way to really boost the economy?
Absolutely not. I think what the government is doing at this point in time is that they're in survival mode.
Right.
And what things that I noticed from the budget was that what they're basically doing is fiscal consolidation. So they're cutting here, they're putting there, and they're just rearranging the money. But what I'm not seeing is that extra innovation that will actually have those long-term effects, those long-term beneficial and sustainable effects on the economy. So while I think that while we're in survival mode, taxation is something that can help us out in terms of government revenue, I don't think that it is the only possible solution to, all of this.
Now, Ruqayyah, Dana said something very important there about not seeing the investment into innovation. But is that the government's role, or is their role to create the policy that allows for investment into innovation? Because we see in the tax breaks given for technology and tech support companies and things like that. We see in the tax breaks given for artists, for the creative industries. We're seeing all those policies being set up, hoping that the public and the private sector get involved to be able to finance and invest. So is that the role what is the role of the government in this situation now?
Well, you see, the role of the government depends on the country that you're living in, right? In terms of Trinidad and Tobago, of course, our government is there to create the policy and allow for that innovation to happen. And what we have in Trinidad is that we've gotten a bit too comfortable with the idea that the government is supposed to do absolutely every single thing for you, right? That is not necessarily the main role of the states. Right? The main role of the states, as we all know, I mean, we all pass through social studies, we know what the main role of the states is. But what we need to encourage is the corporate sector to really step up the plate. We need a bit more of public-private partnerships, and we really need the citizenry to understand that the opportunity that we are getting with these tax exemptions and allowances and stuff is there for us to then take up the mantle. It's difficult, and in some cases it may be very hard for us to sort of do that, but it's the reality of the situation, The states cannot get us out of COVID-19. We have to get us out of COVID-19. It's all of us in this together.
Couldn't close it off any better than that. Dana Sukde, I want to thank you very much for joining me. She's the Vice President of the Economic Society of the University of the West Indies. And of course, Ruqayyah Scott here in studio with me is the President of the same Economic Society of the University of the West Indies. I want to thank both of you ladies for joining me this morning. And you said it best there. We have to get ourselves out of the situation. Let's take a quick break and we come back with so much more right here in the Now Morning Show.